It's just after 11 o'clock on Saturday the 10th of September, and it's the start of the Winchester Open Weekend. And here with the Friends of King Alfred Buses, we are using the opportunity to invite people to come and look at our pop-up museum, which will be established on this site, the cattle market, just off Andover Road, over the next half an hour or so, and be open to the public from 12 noon till 4 o'clock for people to come and have a good look around the buses, a bit closer perhaps than they normally do, and have a chat with us and hopefully spread the word about the Friends of King Alfred Buses. Good morning from St Catherine's Park and Ride, where our Friends of King Alfred Buses autumn running day is starting. We would of course normally be in the Broadway, but we've had to transfer our operations out of the Broadway because there is a proclamation of the ascent of King Charles III to the throne, and that means the Broadway is being closed. So a feature of today's operation is that not only do we have the Dennis, everyone's used to the little Dennis giving rides, very popular, but this time we have the Albion Victor, 1935 Abbots of Farnham bodied Albion Victor, just a 20-seater, very luxurious vehicle. That's out on the road today and giving rides alongside the Dennis. So that's a very important thing, two pre-war vehicles giving rides, and hopefully lots of people will take advantage of that. Now the other thing about this year is that it's 100 years in October, 9th of October precisely, since the first King Alfred bus service started in Winchester. So on the 9th of February 1922, King Alfred buses started running regularly to Stanmore, to Twyford and to Littleton. And that was the beginning of, not of King Alfred Motor Services, that had already been founded, but of the King Alfred bus service in Winchester, which therefore, in October, we're celebrating 100 years since the start of King Alfred buses. And with the sun shining, the birds singing, we hope it'll be fun.
Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Excellent.
Let me introduce you to AAA 756, better known as Victor II. This is an Albion Victor. It was built in 1935 and it has a very, very rare body by Abbott, E.D. Abbott of Farnham. And it is a very special vehicle, apart from being a member of our collection, of course. This coach was used by the Chisnall family, by the governor in particular, Robert Chisnall Sr., to take himself and his family and friends to the races. Mr. Chisnall was a great race goer and lover of the horses, so trips to the races were an important part of relaxing in the life of King Alfred Motor Services in the 1920s and 30s. And this vehicle was used to take him and them to the races before the war, up until 1939, and again, although he had died in 1945, it was used for similar purposes in the late 1940s. It was rather small, a 20-seater, very luxurious, lovely vehicle to ride in, like a huge car really, petrol engine, but it wasn't much use practically as a vehicle to move the masses. So after the war its use was not very great, and by 1949-50 it had been retired. A big thirsty petrol engine. By then the coaches were diesel engined and bigger, 33, 35 seats rather than 20, and so it was consigned to the basement of the coach garage in Chesil Street, where it sat for many years through the 1950s, until eventually the Chisnalls were approached by the Rolls brothers, two brothers who were looking for a vehicle to preserve. This is very early on in bus preservation, 1959. They took one look at the Albion Victor, fell in love with it and bought it. So it came away from Winchester in 1959, and the Rolls brothers owned it for 2 or 3 years, and then in the very early 60s Dave Hurley, who is a FOCAB member of great repute, but of course FOCAB didn't exist then, he bought this coach and he owned it and preserved it and loved it, and his family all involved in making it look like it looks today actually. He kept it for 50 odd years until 2012 or thereabouts, when eventually he decided it was time to move it on from his personal collection, and it was sold to us at FOCAB. Now Dave Hurley is still one of our members and still a great supporter of the Victor, as you see it sitting behind me today in 2022. So here we are inside 756, and you can see that it is a glorified motor car, really. It's a mixture between a coach and a car, built of course by Abbott's, who really made car bodies, not coach bodies, very few coach bodies that they built. And the seats that you see here are particularly special because they are much older than the vehicle, which itself dates from 1935, so no chicken. But these seats came out of the 1926 built Leyland vehicle called the Deluxe, which was a charabanc really, an opening roof, completely opening roof, as opposed to this which has a half opening roof. There's nothing quite like running through the New Forest with the roof open and the sun shining through. This will certainly make sure your hairdo is blown out of true. But of course, a wonderful facility. Not so good when it's raining, but at least you can shut the roof in those circumstances. And compared to the early charabancs, which had a complete opening roof, the whole roof settled down to the back, putting this up was a big job, whereas shutting this, if it starts to rain, is a simple matter of literally getting hold of the handle and pulling the thing back closed again. Voila. And the seats that you see here are particularly special. They were so luxurious and lovely that when the time had come to replace the Deluxe with a more modern vehicle, this one, the Chisnells decided to keep the seats and to move them into this vehicle on its construction. And so these seats come from the Deluxe. So these are even older. They're nearly 100 years old. The moquette on them is definitely from 1935, if not 1926. So we are very protective of them because they're quite sort of worn, and they will worn some more. But you can see what a splendid vehicle it is, with a green lining, these lovely round lights up here which provide light in the darkness, and a lino floor. In the days of 1935ish, lino was very much the fashion. Now we're around the back of the coach now, and you can see the rather fine sign writing, King Alfred Winchester, and it's worth remembering that this is the third generation of coaches in Mr. Chisnell's fleet. He started back in 1920 with Leyland RAFs, they were called. They were reconstructed First World War vehicles that were released onto the market and were bodied as charabancs. Those vehicles had rows of seats with doors on either side. You climbed up into the seat row. There was no gangway inside, and the roof was entirely folded over the top or folded to the back. So normally, in good weather like today, that vehicle would have no roof on it, and it would be driving along on solid tyres, not pneumatic. And remember, the speed limit was 12 miles an hour. So imagine taking a trip from Winchester to, for example, Cheddar Gorge in a solid tyred charabanc. But on the back it would have said King Alfred, rather like this. They were built in 1920. They were replaced by pneumatic tyred vehicles, and indeed they were fitted themselves with pneumatic tyres in the late 1920s. We've talked about the Deluxe. The Deluxe was a 1926 vehicle. By that time, proper sides to the vehicle, although the roof could still be taken right down. By the time you get to 1935 and this coach, you see a number of features. now we want to start the Albion and actually get it running. So this is a straightforward proposition these days because we fitted this bus with a self-starter. In the old days it had to be swung to start it, but nonetheless the principles around the starting the process, if you like, are the same. So we begin with turning on the fuel supply. This is the AutoVac, and basically this is a tank which stores petrol to be gravity fed into the engine. When the original vehicles were being built, the tank was characteristically up below the windscreen, so above the height of the engine, and the fuel just came down by gravity into the engine. Now we are with a more sophisticated vehicle, we've got the tank below the engine, somewhere at the back of the vehicle. So the AutoVac is almost what it says, an automatic vacuum. It's vacuuming up the petrol and putting it into a tank which is above the engine so that it can then be fed into the engine by gravity. So we need to turn that on, and that handle is below, and it's a simple action. When it's off, it's to the right. When it's flowing, it's down like that. So it's now on and ready to go. So we're okay for the fuel. Now, assuming the engine is cold, the next issue is that we need to pull the choke out. Now, this is literally pulling a piece of wire. So we pull it out, and
what does choke do?
It enriches the fuel.
Put the choke on.
There we are. Out it is. Choke's out. We're ready to roll. Then the handle is turned a couple of turns. We're ready then to hop into the cab and press the button. Here we are at the driving position of the Victor, and you can see it's a very vertical steering wheel and not many turns from lock to lock, so it's quite a decisive vehicle on the road. It has a crash gearbox, conventional 4-speed, so you need to double declutch and wait time and all that kind of thing when changing gear. The most disruptive part of the driving experience is the fact that the throttle is in the middle, not to the right as you have it today, between the clutch pedal on the left and the brake on the right. That does trip up the unwary on occasions, but once you've got the hang of that, then this vehicle is a very nice, smooth coach to drive. The handbrake's on the right hand side, and the whole arrangement is pretty neat. Now, it's the requirement of the 1930 Road Traffic Act that all vehicles that are licensed as PSVs anyway, PCVs these days, should carry the unladen weight of the vehicle on the outside for display. This vehicle is no exception. Here we see, in fact, what a light vehicle it is, not 4 tons unladen. The recording is quite clear, unladen weight, UW, and then it's telling us how many tons, how many hundredweights, CWTs, and how many quarters. Now, for most people, we're talking gibberish because we think of a ton as a metric 1,000 kilogram weight. This ton is not that ton, it's a slightly different, it's an imperial ton. Much the same weight, if it fell on your toe, it would feel similar. Ouch! To help us understand that, there are 20 hundredweights in a ton, and there are 4 quarters in a hundredweight. And below the quarter, but not marked on here, there are 28 pounds in a quarter. Now, by a pound, we would say LBS, or LB for pound, LBS for more than 1 pound. Here we have 3 tons, 18 hundredweights, and 3 quarters to give us the weight of this vehicle unladen. As soon as you get people on it, of course, it weigh a lot more. But nonetheless, that's the unladen weight, and that is a statutory requirement, and all vehicles carry it. So here we are, it's approaching 4:30 on Sunday, and we have nearly completed our running day today. It's been sunny all day. Quite a few people have come to join us. It's been a bit complicated because we've had to avoid using the Broadway for quite a lot of the time, and that seems a bit odd. But nonetheless, using the St Catherine's Park and Ride where we are now, we've been able to keep the show on the road. All the vehicles have been behaving very well. We've had enough people to crew things. Very grateful to all the volunteers who actually make these days work. And today, of course, is after yesterday, so there have been 2 days of effort required. Indeed, 3 days, because we had to move buses around on Friday as well. So a great vote of thanks really to all the Friends of King Alfred Buses members who actually get in there and make it happen. But also, we're always so pleased to see our visitors, and it's nice to see people enjoying themselves. And that's what we've been doing today. So hopefully that's kept the name of King Alfred Motor Services in big letters in people's minds. And remember that we now have a king in the United Kingdom. We say always in the Friends of King Alfred Buses, have done for 40 years, long live the king. So that's the most appropriate phrase for today, Sunday, the 11th of September 2022, when the fact of King Charles III coming to the throne has been proclaimed here in Winchester Broadway, and we've been part of it in a sort of a way. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks to everybody, and goodbye from Winchester.
Thank you for watching. My special thanks to all members of Friends of King Alfred Buses. Thanks for everyone helping to make this video. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Hello Wallace.